pretty pleased with this, as this is probably the first year which we've had a more substantial blueberry harvest. So here we have this corner for some at-home planting that I've done, and this is all entirely pots. And firstly we have here a tayberry, and a tayberry is just a cross between a blackberry and a raspberry. It produces really nice fruit, and like the blackberry, it bears one time in a significant amount, but like the raspberry, the fruit comes up earlier in the season rather than later like the blackberry does. And then here is a plum tree that I planted from seed some years back. 6 years on, haven't got anything yet, but I'm hoping. And then here I have a blackberry which produces the long variety of blackberry, and next to that we have a raspberry over here. And here is one of my favorites, my fig tree. And the interesting thing about the fig, when you look at this, is that you can see there's buds and there's also some fruit on here, and the fruit tends to begin coming up first rather than the actual buds for the leaves. And so what that means is that you typically need to make sure that in springtime, as these fruits which have overwintered start coming up, that it gets plenty of water, even as much as twice a day. Filling this thing of water is what is needed. And once it gets through possibly the first couple of months of heavy watering like that, it will then hold on to this crop which is here. And this is the crop that tends to come up in the UK and is known as the Berber crop, because it would have overwintered and come through before the leaves start bursting forth. And that's important because our climate doesn't allow for the second crop, which would come through later, to actually be viable in the UK, because our temperatures seem to plummet at the time when it would be needful for it to ripen. So yeah, so the first crop here, this is what's going to swell and be harvestable in about August. The second crop would have been maybe October, but as I said, our climate doesn't allow it. Also here I have some strawberries, some hazelnut trees that started off, and then here what we have is some red currant, and you can see the flowers are actually coming up. So here you can see the flowers are coming up here, and then they'll eventually, those buds will open up, get pollinated and start making us some red currants. Have over here as well goji berry. Behind that, another blackberry, but this is a regular blackberry. Now what I'm really proud of are these blueberries, and as you can see, these are the flowers that come through, and what will happen is that these will pollinate. And then if you notice, what we have behind here is there's this little green star which is kind of behind here. The petals will drop off, and then this green star here will swell in to become our blueberry fruit. And as you can see, I have got a lot of flowers on this blueberry plant here, and then the fortunate thing is that I have 4 of them. So you can see this is from the other one here, that's a second plant. I have another plant here, we've got another one which is right here, and so I've got 4 here, 2 of the same variety and the other 2 of another 2 varieties. Hi guys, just thought today I'd talk to you about blueberries, and as you can see next to me I have some blueberry plants. I have 4 in total, and I originally started out with 2 which I bought maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and then about a year or so ago, maybe 2 years, I decided to buy a couple more. Now the important thing I wanted to share about growing blueberries is the things that are required for them to grow successfully which are different to other types of plants. So in this case, pH is the big thing you have to be mindful of, because in the case of blueberries, they like acidic soil, and they need that acidic soil so that they can absorb nutrients better, specifically iron. And so if the soil is not acidic enough, you get a problem where the leaves start to get discolored. And so the way to deal with this is to ensure that we have the right compost. And this is really useful to know because, interestingly enough, blueberries only were recently cultivated, even in the United States where they originate from. And the issue that was the problem with cultivating them was the issue of acidity of soil. And it wasn't until maybe I think about 100 years ago where they discovered this issue and then were able to start mass producing blueberries to sell to the markets. So the soil that we can get to overcome the issue of acidity in the soil is actually ericaceous compost, and that's what's used for rhododendrons. And so if you ensure that you have that type of compost, you will have the conditions and the pH which is ideal for your blueberries to thrive. Specifically in the case of the soil as well, this is important because even when it comes to maybe considering trying to plant them directly in the soil, our soils in this country as well are not acidic, and so therefore this is another reason why we have to be mindful of using the ericaceous compost. Another thing as well is the watering. So although our soils aren't acidic, strangely enough our rain is acid rain, so that's why it's good to water these using water that has been collected maybe in a water butt, which is rainwater, and you can water in your blueberries that way. And the blueberries as well, they like to have conditions whereby they're not sodden in water, but they do like to be kept a bit moist. So ideally you want to put down some mulch. So specifically what I've used is some of this stuff here, which is some pine needles, and this will help to keep the moisture in. But the main thing is to make sure that I water regularly, but I'm not keeping it too sodden. And the advantage of using this is that it will keep whatever moisture has actually been applied through the watering process. In the case of the blueberries as well, I have got 4 plants as I mentioned. 2 are the same variety and the other 2 are 2 different varieties. And I've heard that to maximize your crop you want to have different varieties of blueberries growing together. And I wasn't sure whether that meant 2 different plants or 2 separate varieties. So since I'd already started out with 2 plants of the same variety, I just thought I'd add 2 more plants of a different variety, and so I know that my bases are covered. So that's something to watch out for. And another thing, lastly, is netting. So I've noticed this year that blackbirds have taken a liking to my blueberries, so I made sure that once they were forming that I netted these. So that's something to just be very mindful of. And now I'm just going to show you the process of harvesting. You see that these come off really easy, unlike some other berries which sometimes can take a little bit of damage to the stems or be very stubborn when coming off, but these come off really easily. There you go, you can see those are the first ones here that I'm picking. And I just have to continue just making sure that I avoid any that are still ripening. And inevitably there will be quite a few that are still left to ripen, so I will be coming back to this and some of the other bushes over time. And here's the final result. So this is how much I was able to get. Pretty pleased with this, as this is probably the first year which we've had a more substantial blueberry harvest, and as the years go on I believe that with the right care we should get more of this and a bigger harvest overall. So that's it for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.